everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Outside Insider here on Philly Sports Network with myself, Liam Jenkins. 2 episodes within a week. I'm spoiling you or ruining your day, depending how you look at it. But this is another episode recounting everything from the last week regarding the Eagles. And coming off their bye, there had to be a couple speed bumps, right? It couldn't just be as simple as getting Golden Tate for a 3rd round pick and then sweeping into a Sunday night football clash with their most heated rival and getting the job done. There had to be some sort of obstacle, some hurdle, something that just swept through and made life a little bit more difficult. And that's what we're going to be talking about on today's show. But before we get there, if you're new around here, if this is your first time hearing a British kid wailing about the Eagles, hit that subscribe button. It would mean the absolute world to me. Whether you're on YouTube or Spreaker or wherever you're listening to, in the description there's a link that will take you straight to Apple Podcasts. This means you get the show for free instantly whenever it's uploaded. You never have to worry about trying to find it again. I mean, even I do get my own podcast, but that's not the point, alright? We're not talking about that. If you're new around here, make sure you hit that subscribe button. It's the only way this show grows. So if you get into Apple Podcasts, rate it 5 stars if you enjoy what we do. The quicker we can get bigger, the more prizes, the more cool stuff we can do. And before we get to today's show, another massive thank you to anyone that is subscribed to our YouTube channel. I can't even explain how much this means to me. We're on 4,000 subscribers now. Plenty of things in the works, including a documentary or 2, some Madden content maybe on the way, and some other vlogs and film room content as well. So make sure you stick around if you're watching this on YouTube. But now we've got the emotional thank yous out the way, we can get into the real deal. And there is an elephant in the room right now. There is a very big topic that not a lot of people like discussing because of the nature of it, but we have to delve into it. And I promised myself this week I wasn't going to use a car analogy because someone told me who, listens to this show that all I do is use car analogies. And there was one that was good, but the rest are kind of hard to understand, although she does drive, which bedazzles me. But we'll move on from that. I'm going to try and use an analogy, not using a car, but more doing something to the car. Not that, you dirty-minded people. Here we are then, okay. The only way I can kind of put this into words is, you've got an old car. We're going straight back into cars, aren't we? You've got an old car, okay? It's sat out at the front of your house, and do you know what? It's had a very good run. You've taken that car everywhere with you. Thousands and thousands of miles on the clock. You've had family holidays. You've had tremendous memories. A few breakdowns along the way. But most recently, in the last 2 years, it's failed its MOTs. Now, if you're in America and you don't know what an MOT is, I don't know how to explain it other than a big test that means your car's on the road or not. It's failed both of them, and it's just sat in the front of your house, and you know that eventually that car has got to go. But you promised that car, because it's got feelings apparently, that you're going to have it for 1 more year. You'll give it 1 more run. If after that it doesn't work, you'll move on, you'll sell it, scrap it, get a new car. Okay? But that's not good enough. What you do instead is, whenever you've got some free time, you're outside the front of the house, you're polishing that car. You know that weird show where it's like My Strange Addiction and the guy's like kissing his car and says he gets a bit intimate with... You're that guy with this car, alright? And the more you put into it, you're glossing it, you're hoovering the interior, making sure it's all lovely. And your wife's inside the house and she has got 3 screaming kids that all need feeding. She's got to clean the house, cook you dinner, and she's crying for help. She's like, Liam, get inside. Okay, that car is gonna scrap anyway. What is the point in polishing it? And you're like, well, we might go shopping with it one day next week. It might come back. We might need to take the kids to school in it. It's like, honey, we've got a perfect 4x4 outside. We don't need to take that scrapmobile. But don't worry, I'll keep polishing it anyway. So I keep polishing it. And the wife again. The kids at this point, maybe they've messed their pants and they're wiping it all over the wall. It's all going wrong, okay? The whole house is burning down. The food's on fire. The drink's spilt. The drains are leaking. One of the kids has pissed himself. And she's like, Liam, get inside. I need your help. And you're like, I can't. I need to finish this car. If you haven't guessed what I'm talking about yet, it is, unfortunately, the roster mismanagement with whatever the hell is going on with Darren Sproles. Now, to put what is essentially a year-long story into context, or just to simplify it down a little bit, Darren Sproles, at the end, during 2017, broke his arm, tore his ACL in the same play. Absolutely horrific injury. It was really tough to watch. Fan favourite for the Eagles. Everyone loves the guy. He's been there since 2013. 3 Pro Bowl seasons as a special teamer. The team's premier punt returner. And this was the year he was going to come back. Last year, he watched the Eagles from the sideline win a Super Bowl without him. He put a big article on his website saying, hey, I'm going to play one more year, one last rodeo, and then we'll call it a day. And then, essentially, a bit of a wobbly off-season. Doesn't really need to take too much activity in anything because he's been here since 2004, so you don't really need to put him through OTAs and training camp, let alone, a 4th game of preseason. In week 1 against the Falcons, Sproles picks up a hamstring injury. As time goes on, it went from being week to week, to getting better, to improving, to being close, to a bit further away, to being very close, to not at all. Darren Sproles was never placed on injured reserve. Doing so would have freed up a roster spot. Now, why does that matter? Well, gentle listener, let me inform you of why that is so crucial. That during that time span, those opening few weeks of the season, the Eagles lost 3 defensive tackles. Of course, they were without Jernigan. Nata missed some time. Destiny Vial was then waived because he wasn't doing anything. So Fletcher Cox was being partnered by undrafted free agents in like Bruce Hector, Trayvon Hester, anyone else with Hector, Heller, I don't know, anyone really. 4 defensive backs, including Sidney Jones, now Jalen Mills, Corey Graham, Rodney McLeod, all injured. Mac Hollins, Mike Wallace, wide receivers. Couple of offensive linemen were banged up. Jay Ajayi goes down. That leaves you with 3 running backs who Wendell Smallwood facing the least coverage in the box of absolutely any running back in the league. And still can't get it done. And of course Richard Rodgers, the tight end, which meant the team were without, those bunched 13 personnel sets for quite some time. But still, instead of sending Darren Sproles to injured reserve in signing one of those players, the Eagles kept him on and just held him out of practice. Just let him walk around, play that weird basketball game they've got in the locker room, have some biscuits, maybe watch Netflix with the guys. Him and Carson can just go and chill out, play a bit of Madden, why not? And all the while, the team is screaming for help. The opening few weeks of the season, even against Carolina, I've said it a few weeks in a row now, where Olshon and Zach Ertz were targeted more than the rest of the team combined. We saw it with the fact that defensive tackles, Fletcher Cox is having to play nearly 90% of defensive snaps sometimes. That's your franchise defensive tackle in a rotation where that's the name of the game. Where moving guys in and out, the idea is that he plays maybe 50-60%. 2016 and 17, Bo Allen and Destiny Vial actually accounted for over 60% of snaps. But now Cox, who, without that double team with Timmy Jernigan, without having that attention lifted off his shoulders, is having to battle more pressure than ever and has still posted 4 sacks. At defensive back, the team bring in Dexter McDougal off the street, who has spent the last 6 months playing PUBG, and he gets absolutely ruined because the team didn't want to give up a roster spot. Now we'll get on to Dexter McDougal a little later. The final piece in this move was DeAndre Carter. The Eagles waived DeAndre Carter, who was averaging 10.3 yards per punt return, which is pretty damn good. They waived him, they got rid of him. Within a day, he was picked up by the Texans, and in that same window, Darren Sproles re-aggravates a hamstring injury, and down he goes once again. And now the Eagles are without a premier punt returner, they're without their actual punt returner, and now they're in trouble. Because who do you give it to? Yes, Nelson Aguilar had 4 touchdown punt returns during his time at USC, but if he was that great, why has he not been used sooner? Golden Tate has barely touched a punt return for the last 3 years, and on top of having to learn a playbook, on top of having to get acclimated with an offense, get on the same page with his quarterback so that he understands the body language, he's now going to be back fielding punts in a rivalry game where if you could pick 2 teams that want to rip each other's throat out, it would be these 2. You're going to risk Golden Tate against that Cowboy special teams unit, who are gonna take cheap shots, who are gonna take hits and expose him. If he got injured now, could you imagine the backlash? It would be like waking up to a cup of cold sick on Christmas morning. There is no way the Eagles can feel comfortable throwing Golden Tate out there. What about Corey Clement? Well, it just so happens he muffed 2 punts earlier in the year. They're not going back to him for a while. Wendell Smallwood has hardly been the most efficient punt returner on the planet. He's not going to be given a shot. Are they just... Who are they going to get out there? Jordan Mailata? Jason Kelsey? At this point, you may as well put Avonte Maddox out there. He's doing everything else. I really don't understand it, but there is something that has to happen with this team and Darren Sproles now. The team whiffed on the opportunity to send him to IR, and the worst thing is that wouldn't have even impacted his season that much. He could have still come back in week 9. But resting him for that home stretch, resting him for whatever lay ahead, to bring in, even if it is an extra bulk defensive tackle, even if it was just a corner you're familiar with, or just trading with someone, instead, you've got to waive that guy. You've got to waive DeAndre Carter, who at the time it makes sense, and then Darren Sproles gets injured again. To me, this screams fishy. It screams roster mismanagement. The Eagles have been way too loyal to someone who, while he has had an illustrious history, and he is 7th on the, I think it's dual-purpose yards list now, or 7th most all-purpose yards in NFL history, with 19,180, that he hasn't produced that recently. In his last 5 games for the Eagles, he has 71 rushing yards and 95 receiving yards. And you're telling me you're going to hold a roster spot for that? Wendell Smallwood is putting up more than that, for Christ's sake. Josh Adams is probably putting up more than that. Corey Clement. Well, alright, let's not get too ahead of ourselves. But the point I'm making is that you stay... Was it that Batman quote from a couple films ago? You either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. And the Eagles were way too loyal here. Now they have to stick with Darren Sproles. It's way too late to make a move. Obviously, the trade deadline has passed. Doug Peterson said he expects to play this season, but at what cost? At what level? What's he going to produce? You've now lost your main punt returner, so he's going to have to come in with a weight of responsibility which wasn't even there before. There's now no depth. So Sproles is going to have to come in, who apparently was 100%. If you're 100% recovered from an injury, you don't re-aggravate that same injury a day later on your first practice. You just don't. Like, there's no way that makes any kind of sense. It's really, really strange, and I'm not sure whether this is some Sixers level Dr. Wizardry, whether it's just Doug Peterson and the Eagles wanting Sproles in the building. They want him to see out his career on the field and have that lovely fairy tale ending that of course he deserves, but the fact of the matter is that it's hurt the team. Re-signing him wasn't the crime here. That wasn't the bad move. Cutting him was probably a little bit, the opposite. It would have been a bit heartless. We've all been there where someone just cuts you off and you're like, oh, well, I mean, I deserve more than that. That would have been the case with Darren Sproles, because he does deserve more. He's given this franchise everything. He's been an incredible asset to Carson Wentz during his 2 years here. But the thing is, there's a difference between re-signing him and ignoring what's in the room and not being able to see the forest for the trees. Sending him on IR would have been the best move. That way he stays on the roster. He stays in contact with the team. He's still a part of that team's life. He's still a part of every training session. But instead, you've pushed it one step further, where now there are other aspects of that team that needed help. They were ignored in favour of a veteran, and you can't help but feel that this has happened before. Chris Marigot sits on IR with a torn PCL. That is the hardest injury to come back from. Still sits on IR. Jason Peters, who has really been struggling this season, really struggled last season, battled injury for the last 3 years, is costing the team quite a hefty amount of money. I don't know what happens next year with Jason Peters, but it would not surprise me to see the team bring him back, because it's almost like they're indebted. They feel like they're indebted to these veteran players that have provided something to them before. At the end of the day, football's a business, and Howie Roseman has been exceptional in drawing that line, apart from when it comes to veterans. The only man I can think of that this didn't apply to was Brent Selleck. And that was a real shame, because everyone knew he could still play at a high level. Jason Peters can still play at a high level, but he got bested by rookies earlier in the year against Tennessee. He's been assaulted by most defensive ends, and now he's going to face DeMarcus Lawrence, one of the finest pass rushers in the game. I think we could be having a very similar discussion about Jason Peters as we are about Darren Sproles. Now, I don't know what goes next for the Eagles. Are they going to bring in some outside help? There are certainly some names. You've got Braxton Miller on the practice squad, who could very well be a candidate to come up and take some returns. You've also got names who, like Tyler Ervin, who was waived by the Texans, which would be the dodgiest move ever, because the Texans, beg your pardon, actually waived Ervin and signed Carter. If the Eagles sign Ervin, that's just a backdoor trade, really. But the point is now that unless you're going to look at some obscure player that you haven't really heard of, or bring in a name just for punts, you're going to be in a spot of bother. And they've got to suck this up now and live with it, because even with the news of Darren Sproles, I mean, you've got various free agents out there. A name like Austin Duke out of UNCC would be great, but you're not going to bring him in immediately. You're not going to bring a guy in and go, right, hey, we know you haven't played football for 6 weeks or played an NFL special teams unit all year. Do you want to go field some punts for us? In a Sunday night matchup where we're 0.500, we're 1 point behind, 1 game behind Washington, and we need a win. Not going to happen. I'd love to know what your thoughts are on this, guys, because it's a bit of a messy situation. I can completely understand that some Eagles fans will feel that they've done right by Sproles. Others will feel the more brash, I guess, business-related route. And I'm kind of torn between the two. But if you would like to let me know, please leave a comment. I'd love to hear your discussions. Let's get some conversations going. It's a very tricky spot to be in. And of course, again, if you are new around here, make sure you hit subscribe and join the Outside Insider family, because we can't grow without you, and if you can get this show on your phone through Apple Podcasts, it would mean a lot. We're going to try and get to some other platforms as well. We want to branch out to Stitcher and Google Play Podcast Store, whatever that is thing, but that's going. We're going to move on now to the second point of the week before we get on to previewing the game, and this is another one, and I've got to use an analogy for this. This isn't even related to cars in the slightest. I'm very proud of this one. But there was a player that I mentioned during this Darren Sproles saga by the name of Dexter McDougal. And again, it goes back to the same thing of not being able to see the forest for the trees. Where you've got something that's golden, okay? You've got a player there on your roster that in every opportunity he has been asked to step up, he has stole the show. You ask this kid to step up. Alright, it's the bottom of the 9th inning. He would hit a home run out of the park, run, catch it, bring it back and stuff it into the face of Jim Schwartz, and he still can't get a game. The only analogy I can got for this is if you know you've got something with someone, you know there's that relationship there, that connection, you see it every single day, you know it's there, and instead you try to shove that down, pretend it's not there, and bring in someone else. Maybe you want to go out on a night out, maybe there's a guy on Tinder, a girl on Tinder, maybe it's something else, but you try and maybe turn a blind eye and go elsewhere, alright? And eventually you get to the realisation where that was a stupid decision, shouldn't have done that, what I wanted was right under my nose all along. That is exactly what I'm praying is happening with Rasul Douglas right now, because the Eagles bring in Dexter McDougal, who in 2 weeks played 106 defensive snaps. What did he do in those snaps other than get cut? The answer is nothing. He just gave up yards, very almost gave up a touchdown in his debut, very almost gave up a touchdown against the Jags, struggled heavily against the Jags. Rasul Douglas has played 94 snaps all season long. Do you know what he's done in those 94 snaps? A clutch interception against the Falcons, and a big time showing against the Jags with a vital pass defense, some sound coverage, and a tackle on the day. That's the guy. He was the guy last year when Ronald Darby went down with injury and they shoved him into the deep end and he held his own. A rookie, a 3rd round pick out of West Virginia. In his first 2 games, Had a pass defense against the Chiefs, then one against the Giants. He had an interception against the Giants on a key play to Brandon Marshall. And then, against the Panthers, he has another interception and 3 passes defensed. And this guy was a ball hawk at West Virginia. We know this. I believe off the top of my head he had 18 picks during his time there. He is a ball hawking corner. The problem was he didn't play much press coverage. He didn't play a lot of man coverage because of the West Virginia scheme. And he always felt like a misfit. Like he was brought in by the board, by the front office. And Jim Schwartz couldn't find a place for him. Ronald Darby comes back, struggles. Into the fray once again. Goes Rasul Douglas. Big game against Chicago. Big game against Denver. We're now seeing it in 2018. I know that Rasul Douglas was not a nickel cornerback. I know it would be risky moving a 6'2" guy who weighs 209 pounds inside. I get that. But you're telling me there is no way you can move him to safety, which there is a film room video on my channel begging for the move. On the Philly Sports Network YouTube channel, you can go and check it out, where I called Rasul Douglas the next great ball hawking safety in the vein of Kurt Coleman. You're telling me this guy with those gangly arms at 6'2", who has ball hawk tendencies, great awareness and great sideline to sideline speed, couldn't play safety while Maddox goes into the slot. Instead, you would more see it fit to bring in a corner off the street who has not played an NFL snap since you cut him, I believe, last year. Sure, he's had an off-season and training camp, but he comes back to the team, gets dropped into the deep end, and does absolutely nothing. I don't understand what that thought process is. At some point, Jim Schwartz, you've got to smell the bacon. It's been cooking under your nose for 2 hours while you're in bed trying to order a takeaway. Your wife's downstairs cooking you up a fully fried English breakfast with bangers and mash and bacon. No one has mash for breakfast, just as a heads up. I'm setting the tone, alright? But you've got all of this stuff, your wife's making you a glorious breakfast in bed, and she brings it up, and you're on a takeaway trying to get a McMuffin. See what's going on, see what's under your nose, and realise that that's what your priority should have been all along. That's where I should have been this whole time. Rasul Douglas, for whatever reason, now I said a few weeks ago, there was a source that told me that there was a disgruntlement after Darby came back and was struggling that Douglas wasn't out on the field. Whether there were tensions between himself and the coordinator, I don't know. I don't know the extent of how that goes or fares into a locker room, but it's safe to say Rasul Douglas wasn't best pleased. But this 24-year-old guy with Jalen Mills now potentially out this week is going to have another shot. And here's another prediction. He's going to smash it again. It would not surprise me to see him get another interception, or another big key pass breakup on 3rd down, or another big run defense tackle. Because that's what this kid does. You don't need to bring in Dexter McDougal or put your finger in your ear and sing la 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 la, pretend he's not there, go to some guy off the street, when what you've wanted all along is under your nose. There has to be a sense of waking up now. Because to me, the way I'm viewing this, if I'm a defensive coordinator, is Jalen Mills at some point is going to be entering his contract year, which I believe is next season. Are you going to pay Jalen Mills despite the coverage that he's had so far? Despite the problems that he's had? Despite the inconsistency that he's shown since he was a rookie in 2016? Or are you going to let him go, ride 2 years with Rasul Douglas, and potentially pay him after? Have a cornerback group of maybe Darby, maybe another starting corner, depending how you view it. There are some fantastic names coming out of college this year. Then you've got Rasul Douglas, Sidney Jones inside, Maddox and McLeod over the top. You're telling me that's not a better option? But at some point, someone's got to shake it and say, look, I mean, you can pretend you can pretend you're not seeing the value of Rasul Douglas. You can pretend you're not smelling that bacon. You can pretend that you don't know what you actually want. It's going to be under your nose the whole time. And one day when the moment's right, that kid is going to ball out. That bacon's going to ripen. That relationship may flourish. Should I make a car? I won't make a car analogy. There won't be one here. The point is, though, Rasul Douglas, for me, is one of the biggest playmaking potential guys on that defence. We see it time and time and time again. And I really don't know what else he needs to do to earn a spot as a starter anymore. This is going to be his lone moment now. If Jalen Mills is out, where Coach Peterson told the reporters today on Friday that Sidney Jones is closer to returning than Jalen Mills, that gives his West Virginia Bullhawk one more opportunity, one more chance to shine. Is he going to make the most of it? If he does, this shows up a whole different kettle of fish. And I'm personally, from a neutral perspective, I'll be rooting for him. Because I think he has been done dirty. I think that he should have been seeing snaps. Mate, you know, we know he's a backup coming into this season. You've got Mills and Darby both coming off strong years. He wasn't really going to see the field. But as a backup, when one of your corners, when one of your safeties go down, you look to him. When two of them go down, you don't. When three of them go down, you don't. That is injustice, and I think Douglas deserves a shot. So again, I'd love to hear what you guys think. Make sure you're leaving a comment down below and make sure you're subscribing to this show on iTunes. Of course, it's Dallas Hate Week. The Eagles opened up as 6-point favourites. The line has now moved to 7 if you are a betting man. And to me, this just feels a line too narrow for a home game against a rival. It's a must-win for Dallas, but are they really going to do anything after a short week where they get humiliated by the Titans? Like, that's the way we're looking now. That's who we're looking at. I can see it being a high-scoring game, but I can see this line going back down to 6.5. The Cowboys are easy on a short week where they struggled. The Eagles have had 2 weeks, on the other hand, to prepare for this rivalry matchup, and they'll want to make a statement because the NFC East, for the first time all season long, is wobbling. Washington looks vulnerable. Washington is coming off a big loss where a lot of people had them down to make an upset over Atlanta. They got shut down by Matt Ryan and the offense. In fact, here's a little stat for you. The last 3 times the Eagles have played Dallas, they've held them to 28 points combined. And you're telling me that Golden Tate, who scored 2 touchdowns against the Cowboys earlier this year, on the same route, isn't going to have an impact? I mean, this is going to be a tricky spread. It's a tricky game for the Cowboys. But let's look at this cold, hard facts about this one. Dallas has to come back because with 14 or fewer points in its last 16, half of its last 16 outings, in 8 of their last 16 games, they have had 14 or less points. That's bad. That is historically bad. And they're coming up against an Eagles defense who are going to be feeling themselves after the Jags, who are one of the best in red zone percentage in the NFL. The Eagles defense is giving up 83 yards on the ground a game. Their third down defense is 3rd in the league. They're allowing 33% of the time conversions. Their red zone defense is 3rd in the league with 41% allowed for a touchdown. This Eagles defense is red hot. 2nd against the run, 3rd on 3rd down, 3rd in the red zone. That's where you want to be. There's this argument recently that I absolutely love, and it's that yards don't matter. What is the point in baking a cake if you can't put the cherry on it? There is no point in making a meaty dish if you're a vegetarian. This Eagles defense will allow you to get underneath to get all those yards, because once you get inside that 20-yard line, you are scoring 40% of the time. That's a big statement for this Eagles defense against an offense where Dak Prescott isn't trusting his eyes, where he's struggling, where Scott Linehan cannot coordinate an offense that's not inventive, it's not creative, it's nothing new, it's predictable, and Prescott is having a mare, an absolute mare. In fact, according to Sports Info Solutions, Dak Prescott is 30th per attempt and 35th in positive play rate against cover 1 and cover 3 looks. What do the Eagles defense play on so I forgot there. Cover 1 and cover 3. Oh, that's ironic, that, isn't it? It's quite coincidental. Dak Prescott isn't trusting his eyes. He isn't getting through his reads properly. He's holding on to the ball too long. And all that screams is a home crowd that'll be sold out, roaring as a pass rush feasts on the famine. Dak Prescott is not going to be able to do much of anything. And if the Eagles can smother the run and force Dak to throw from behind, this can get messy fast. Take the Eagles and the points if you're a betting man. Take a Philadelphia win. They will advance to 5-4 on the season. And let's be honest, the Eagles have won 5 of their 9 previous games against Dallas dating back to 2013. And since 2010, the Eagles have produced a 5-3 record against the Cowboys on Sunday Night Football. Of course, their most memorable, a 37-9 win against Dallas last November. So we're at that same sort of point now, a week before it, in fact. But this is going to be a game to remember. The Eagles have to come out swinging. It'll be a defense leading the day and Carson Wentz tearing it up on the other end to try and make this a shootout that Dak physically cannot win. From myself, Liam Jenkins, I hope you've enjoyed this show. Make sure you subscribe down below. If you are new to this podcast, if you like what you've heard and you want more car analogies, let me know. Hit subscribe, go to iTunes, rate it 5 stars, and let's grow this thing together. We're going to have a film room video next week. We may have a couple new series on the horizon as well. So stay tuned. From myself, Liam Jenkins, I'll see you next time for another episode of The Outside Insider.